company that yields 5% a year, let's say, and it's going to go up and down in price, we just buy it prior to it going ex-dividend, and then the stock's going to be reduced by the price of the dividend. So if it was $10 a share, and it's going to be paying 50 cents, it would open the following morning at $9.50 minus the 50-cent dividend. But if it goes back up to $10 and above, then we sell our purchase, we get our money back, plus in the 10 days, we get 50 cents per share added to our portfolio. You have 1,000 shares, that's $500. Okay, so let's look at some of the stocks that have dividends. Dow is yielding 4.14%. Leiden Base is yielding 3.85%. DuPont is yielding 3.20. Proxair is yielding 2.84. Monsanto is yielding 2.58. Air Products is also yielding 2.58, and Freeport-McMoRan is yielding 2.20. This is Peter Bruno thanking you. We'll see you here next time.
You've been listening to Buy, Sell, or Hold with Peter Bruno. With over 50 years of background and experience in the financial industry, Peter advises individual, corporate, and institutional clients throughout the United States. For additional information about his original and proprietary research, call his direct toll-free number, 1-800-592-5578, or visit his homepage at peterbrunomedia.com. Nothing said within this program shall be considered a solicitation or an offer to buy, and any investment decisions should be reviewed and subject to one's individual investment objectives. Peter Bruno's Buy, Sell, or Hold is heard daily from 4:30 to 5 and streamed live online at peterbrunomedia.com. Plus, there you will find webcasts and more. That's peterbrunomedia.com.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Okay, we have a caller.
Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Great. Thank you for calling our program.
I just wanted to make a comment to you and to the listeners about how I have been working with your services for such a long time and my feeling.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm a subscriber now to the new Buy, Sell, and Hold newsletter, and I want to let you know, I mean, you hear all the talking heads and you hear all the people, and you don't know which way the market's going to go. When the market's down, they have a reason. When it's up, they have a reason. They don't use your cycles. And just as I'm not a short-term investor, as you know, I'm an investor that tries to stay and ride trends out one way or the other. And just the peace of mind knowing that you've got primary cycle and an investment cycle keeping me in my mutual funds and my positions for the long run is so reassuring that I can't tell you the peace of mind that it brings me to know that I'm following a program that's been working for 40 years.
Buy, Sell, or Hold with Peter Bruno, weekdays at 4:30 on 740 and 1470 AM and 96.9 FM. How profitable has the investment advice you've been getting been? Is your portfolio growing? Is your advisor just following the consensus? These days, conventional wisdom may not be wise enough. You need to hear Peter Bruno's Buy, Sell, or Hold radio program right here every weekday afternoon at 4:30. Peter Bruno's original research analysis has been totally independent and accurate. His cycle analysis has correctly forecasted all the major tops and bottoms, including the crash of 1987 and again in 2008 and again most recently. Peter Bruno's listeners and subscribers have benefited from advice that has called the market highs and lows accurately and early, way before the herd. Find out how this unique system can help your portfolio grow safely and steadily. Visit Peter Bruno's radio websites at peterbrunomedia.com or his newsletter websites at peterbruno.com and subscribe today. But hurry. Now is when you need Peter Bruno's advice. Can you afford to wait?
If you've decided to get back to feeling good again like you used to feel, then you're invited to tune in to the Dr. Bob Martin Show. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, at your service Sunday mornings at 10 on Talk 1470 WNN.
Talk 1470 WWNN Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
If you suffer from excruciating back pain, do not have surgery. Call Dr. Fernando Ranella, MD, and ask him about the new ozone therapy and how it can eliminate your back pain once and for all. End your suffering today. Call Dr. Fernando Ranella, the Center for Back Pain Management, 561-819-6325. That's 561-819-6325 or injectpainaway.com.
You get your monthly mutual fund or 401k statements, look at the bottom line and say, is that it? If after all these years your investments are still making diddly squat, do it yourself. Learn to trade stocks, options, futures, and Forex at Online Trading Academy in South Florida. Learn in real classrooms where students of all ages are taught how money is made in up, sideways, and down markets using a patented rules-based strategy taught only at Online Trading Academy. All instructors are certified, currently trade, and profitable. They show you what they do every day. Most students trade with a couple of $1,000. Since 1997, Online Trading Academy has taught over 100,000 students. You can do this. Tired of low returns? Call now and reserve 2 seats to a free class to see how the banks and institutions trade. Seating is limited. Call 954-668-2510. 954-668-2510. That's 954-668-2510.
What you want to know. What you need to know.
Talk 1470. WNN.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me at Caregiver Solutions Info. This is the show for you, a caregiver. You're dealing with helping someone that has memory problems, Alzheimer's, or some other related dementia, and it's a challenge, it's a struggle, and it's a journey. So this show was created just for you to learn about the journey coming down the road, help you a little bit with that load, learn from experts in the field, learn from other caregivers. And so I'm so glad that you tuned in with us today. We have a great show for you. Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2015. And this week, we're going to be talking about caregiver support groups, what they can do for you, how to find one that suits you and your situation. But first, before we get into that, we always have a Brain Boosters. Brain Boosters is a tip of the week, something that's going to help you either retain the memory that you have or to help boost your cognitive health. And so this week, we're going to be talking about trauma to the head. Now, we all need to decrease the risk of head trauma. What is traumatic brain injury? You've probably all heard of that term, but it is a result from an impact to the head that disrupts normal brain function. And traumatic brain injury is a threat to our cognitive health. You know, we've been talking every week about, keeping our brain healthy. And you might not think about it, but when we have an injury to our head, that affects our brain. And that's going to affect our cognitive health in many different ways. But two ways specifically that a traumatic brain injury can hurt us is that it will be a direct effect, which could be long-lasting, which is a really big problem, and a certain type of traumatic brain injury may increase the risk of developing Alzheimer's or another form of dementia years after the injury takes place. Now, it's so interesting that I decided to talk about this week because earlier in the week, was just actually yesterday, a caregiver came into the office with his loved one, and it turned out that the loved one had a fall, major fall in the bathroom, and hit her head on the floor, and she became unconscious for a while. And the doctor, when this person was diagnosed, learned of this traumatic brain injury that she had and said, you know, they could be related. Your Alzheimer's is related to that, even though it happened several years before. So this is something that we may take for granted. We don't think about that, but we all need to be very, very careful so we can prevent traumatic brain injury, because down the road it could actually lead to Alzheimer's disease or some other related dementia. Now, you wonder about falling. That is the major cause of traumatic brain injury, especially in people over 75 years of age. Falling is the number one reason people go to the hospital and have brain problem or head injuries, which can lead to brain problems. If someone makes a fall, has a fall, you want to check for certain symptoms of brain injury, and those symptoms include unconsciousness, confusion, disorientation, difficulty remembering new information, dizziness, blurred vision, ringing in the ears, trouble speaking coherently, and even changes in emotions or sleep patterns. So if someone experiences a pretty bad fall, you want to make sure that they get medical attention right away. And there's three types of what they consider traumatic brain injury. There's mild, there's moderate, and there's severe. So you might think, well, someone who becomes unconscious, that would be a real severe, but it doesn't have to be. It can actually be a moderate type of brain injury. And someone who is unconscious less than 30 minutes, that would be probably considered a moderate traumatic brain injury. Someone who's unconscious and knocked out for more than 24 hours, that would be considered more severe. So it doesn't matter, though, if you're unconscious or not. The fact is, you can still actually be considered having a traumatic brain injury, which can cause you to have major cognitive decline in later years. So when we talk about falls, how do we prevent having the falls that might cause us to have a traumatic brain injury? First of all, we want to be aware of our surroundings. Now, caregivers, you're very busy. You're sometimes not focused. You're juggling a lot of things. You have a lot on your plate. And sometimes we do things automatically, or we don't think about what we're doing, and we're not paying attention to our surroundings, especially people walking in parking lots, and you're walking through and between cars. And sometimes we stumble. We don't see the parking stanchion there, and sometimes we just trip over it. Sometimes it's easy. We can just trip over our own 2 feet and there's nothing there. So we want to be very conscientious about where we're walking, how we're walking. Make sure that we're wearing the proper footwear for the occasion. Don't want to be unbalanced and trip and fall. And we also want to continue to try to improve our balance. We had someone here several weeks ago. We talked about yoga. We talked about dancing. Those are things that you can do to continually improve your balance. If your balance is better, then you're going to be able to catch yourself and maybe not experience a fall. Another reason that people have traumatic brain injuries are vehicle crashes. Obviously, it's a car accident and you hit your head. So how can we try to prevent that? Well, first of all, we make sure that we always wear a seatbelt, make sure that we're following the rules, and make sure that we know where we're going and we're not distracted. That's why people shouldn't be talking on the phone and doing the cell phone thing because it's going to cause an accident and it could be long lasting. So another reason besides vehicle crashes and falls that people experience, and this one is sometimes we don't think about, but it's been in the news quite a bit, are sports injuries. And a lot of the major teams are considering the sporting industry with all of the problems with boxing, with football, with all of these head injuries. And there are a lot of professionals and well-known professionals who have actually been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and they've had continual bouts to the head. And so there's a correlation there. So if you're doing sports, and it could be something very simple, it could be riding your bicycle, it could be inline skating, whatever you're doing and it's out there and you're vulnerable, make sure that you wear your helmet and you're just extra careful, because any of these types of injuries can be long lasting. And so we're going to try to prevent that. So keep that in mind. Try to be safe. Remember, decrease the risk to you in any way that you can. And we're going to take a short commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to meet two caregiver support group facilitators who have lots to share with us. We'll be right back.
Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare-covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your first choice. Take a pen and jot down this information. Right from the Heart assists families in finding the right living arrangements for their aging parents. Founded in 2012 by Sharon Agate, Senior Lifestyle Consultant, Sharon has counseled seniors and their families for over 20 years in clinical settings and in independent assisted living and memory care communities. Finding the right community can be overwhelming and time-consuming. Right from the Heart takes the stress and worry from you. Sharon will meet with mom or dad and evaluate their needs and lifestyle preferences and create a personalized plan at no cost to you. She will accompany you to visit selected communities and guide you every step of the way so you can be assured you're making a well-informed decision. Call Sharon at 561-374-4696. Sharon's promise to you is in your knowing that her advice will always come right from the heart. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, welcome to Caregiver Solutions. You're either listening to us on your radio or you're watching us on your internet, on your computer. And that website is caregiversolutions.info. And you can either watch us or listen to us every week, same time, same place. So I want to thank, first of all, our national sponsor, Arden Court's Memory Care Community, for making this show possible. Arden Courts is a leader in dementia and Alzheimer's care. They have over 50 assisted livings throughout the United States, and they're a wonderful place for you to find out how you can get help with your loved one when it comes time to either take a break or for long-term care. So speaking of taking a break, Arden Courts would like to offer you, the caregiver, a free day of respite. Take time for you. If you're interested in checking that out and want to have a break and have your loved one be in a safe, secure environment where they can have a good time while you can relax and rest and do what you need to do for yourself, then you want to call Arden Courts. They have a toll-free number. That number is 888-478-2410. call Arden Courts. They'll answer the phone 365 days of the year to ask you, and you can ask them about what is respite, how can I take advantage of it, where the nearest Arden Courts is located to you. And they'll be happy to share that information and get you all set up. So give them a call any day, 365 days a year, because as we know, caregiving doesn't ever stop, and Arden Courts is there for you too. So I'd like to introduce to you today our two guests that we have with us. We have Christina Levine and we have Dale Bruins, and welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. I'm so excited that you both are here with us today. Now, Christina, you're the Executive Director of Arden Courts Memory Care Community in Delray Beach, Florida.
That's correct.
And Dale, you are a volunteer with Alzheimer's Community Care, a local organization.
That's correct.
And both of you are support group facilitators for
Yes.
caregivers.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so I first of all, I have to applaud you and thank you so much for what you do, because caregiving is not easy, especially for someone who's listening to people's issues, questions, concerns, problems, all the time as a support group facilitator. You're really in the trenches with caregivers, and you hear this over and over and over again, but yet you persevere and you do it for years and years. So thank you for what you do, first and foremost.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I want to ask you, each of you, first of all, how long have you been facilitating caregiver support groups, and what actually prompted you to do so? So, Christina, what about you?
Well, I've been running support groups probably on and off for my whole career, so about 35 years.
Wow.
And started off doing a caregiver support group about 25 years ago and did that for many years. Recently, though, the last several years, I've been facilitating two groups for the Alzheimer's Association of Southeast Florida chapter. And I host one in Margate, Florida, and the other one in Delray Beach. So been doing that for quite a while and enjoying it. And they're both different. The one in Margate is an adult children's group, and the one in Delray is mostly spouses.
Great. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in more detail about why there are different types of support groups. Thank you.
You're
and
welcome.
Dale, what about you? What prompted you to get involved?
Well, my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 28 years ago in July of 1986.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And at that point, when you mentioned the word Alzheimer's, people looked at you. They didn't have any idea what the disease was. Neither did I. At that point, fortunately, there was a lady in the city where I lived, which was Madison, Wisconsin, who had some experience with it, and she had formed a local group that dealt with Alzheimer's issues. And she had formed a group of men only whose spouses had some form of dementia, mostly Alzheimer's, and I joined that group. So I've been either in a group or facilitating a group for 28 years.
Wow, you both have so much experience. So we really have the experts right here in the studio for you to listen to all their expertise and how they can help you. It's pretty amazing that, once you start this, I know that both of you have a big heart, and I know you both personally, and that you're both really, really dedicated and passionate about what you do. And I'm sure that's what keeps you going. Mm-hmm. And so tell me, Dale, you mentioned a men's support group, and you have a men's only support group that you actually facilitate now, since you actually started with one when your wife first was diagnosed. Why a men's only support group?
Well, I think when I joined the group 28 years ago, men were reluctant to talk about their feelings. They were reluctant to talk about what their spouses did as a result of having the disease. And so they found it easier to talk about these issues if only men were present. I don't think that's as true today as it was way back then. And
You mean men like to talk about their feelings more now than they did before? Because I'm not so sure about that.
well, I don't know if they like to, but at least we can get them to open up and talk about them. If they don't, I will open up the conversation and ask them about it and then draw them out and let them then take it from there. Actually, I was in this group for many years, and then the facilitator left, and the organization that I was volunteering for in Madison asked me if I would take over the reins of facilitator, which I did. And this group was large. We had 22 or 23 people on our roster, and we'd frequently get 18 or 19 men at one of the meetings.
That's pretty
and
big.
That's a large group. So dealing with that group and all of the issues just covered the waterfront, you might say, of almost any kind of issue that would surface in the role of a caregiver.
Then apparently you retired to Florida.
I moved to Florida in 2009, and I was looking for something to do, and I said to myself, your passion is working with caregivers. You have the expertise, you have the knowledge. Why don't you share that? And so I contacted Alzheimer's Community Care, and the rest is history. I said, I'll be glad to go to some of your support groups and just serve as a resource person, share my experiences, and give any advice that I can based upon what I experienced. And now I facilitate the men's only group. I started that one here in Boca. And I also facilitate a support group where we have both men and women. That one meets every Wednesday. The men's only one meets the first and third Thursdays of the month. And then because I know that it's a good way to make friends, I said to them, I'll serve as a resource person to a third group, so I also go and meet with a group that meets Wednesday afternoons.
Wow, that's wonderful. What a great way to spend your free time by giving back to others. I think that's wonderful. Let me ask you a question about your men's support group. Is it as large as the one that you had up north?
No, it's a very small group. It's not grown very rapidly because I have learned talking to people down here who know of persons who are dealing with this issue, they're reluctant to join a support group, and I can't figure out why. I think I've learned that the people down here that are dealing with it feel that once they've read up on it a little bit and they read a little bit more and they think they know everything about it, then they don't need to join a group, which is not a good thing for them to, a good position for them to take, because we talk about all kinds of issues. We talk about the things that a caregiver should be doing if they're just getting into it. Such things like, do you have a power of attorney for health care? Do you have power of attorney for financial affairs? Do you have property in joint tenancy? And what if that spouse of yours can't sign off on it and you need to sell it? You have to have all these things taken care of to accommodate the spouse who has Alzheimer's, because they no longer can sign off or can make decisions for themselves. And you have to be able to handle these affairs by yourself.
Right. So you talk not only about their feelings, but you talk about practical issues too.
Every kind of issue that might surface, from changing the knobs on your stove so that your spouse doesn't take that knob and turn it on and accidentally burn themselves on the burner, or installing a lock on the top of your door so that your spouse doesn't know where that lock is, so they cannot get out and wander. All of these issues. How do you deal with this questioning that what time of day is it every 2 minutes or every 3 minutes, or what time are we going out for lunch? Those kinds of issues. Issues of incontinence. Issues of, do we tell our spouse what they have? And what is their reaction? How do we deal with their reaction? And how do I respond to them, to all these questions? And
There's so much. I mean,
Oh.
you talk about men read. I think men are macho. You are, and that's just the way men are wired. And so, they want to be the know it all, do it all, right? And I think it is hard for men to accept help more than maybe a woman.
Yes.
And it is harder for them to get into a group. But I'm sure that you found that the ones that have allowed themselves to participate, they've actually learned quite a bit, and they've probably even added to the group as far as what they've experienced to help others.
Well, I think if you were to step into any one of my 3 groups that I work with and ask any of them about the value of it, you would find at least 3 or 4 in each of the groups who would probably say, and I'm not bragging, they would point to me and say, because of him, I'm still alive.
That's right. That's right. Because, it's like the lobster going into the pot of boiling water. You don't know, how hot
That's
it
right.
is, as you're stepping into it little bit by little bit, and you kind of get used to it. But before you know it, it can be overwhelming, and you don't realize how deep you are in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Christina, I want to ask you about your group. You have a spousal support group for either men or women.
Correct.
But you also mentioned that you have one for adult children only.
Yep.
Now tell me about that and why the need for an adult child support group specifically.
Well, it was interesting because I've done support groups for a long time, and when I was dealing with the Alzheimer's Association, I said, what was your greatest need as far as an area for a support group? And they said, we don't have enough adult children because they come out in the evening, and we don't have enough facilitators to facilitate groups in the evening. So we decided to do one in the evening, and after they get out of work, it's a lot more convenient for them. But it's surprisingly how many adult children are not only physically taking care of somebody in their homes while they're going to work all day, and then dealing with the issues of what do I do with mom or dad during the day when I'm working, and then when I come home and I have other issues to deal with, or the weekends. They have totally different issues than a spouse does who's maybe retired, who's home with them all day. So we address different issues and dealing with the work-home balance, and then where do we find time for themselves, and if they have children or adult children or grandchildren that they're also dealing with.
I think they call that the sandwich generation, right?
Yes.
And the reason is
Yes.
because they're in the middle between taking care of elderly parents and younger dependent children. So they're the sandwich generation, and that is hard for them to not only balance, taking care of an elderly parent, children, whether they be small children or kids in school or even college that need a lot of supervision, or actually dealing with the demands of work, dealing with the demands of home. Sometimes there's pets thrown into the mix. And so do you find that adult children take advantage of what's out there for them, or are they sometimes too busy to be able to come?
Well, the group that we have, they actually have we have a good turnout. So, and it's interesting because we do have a mix of men and women. A lot of times, if it's the wife's parents that they're taking care of, the husband also comes with, because if they're living with them, that husband is also participatory. And it's interesting what you were saying, Dale, because a lot of the times the younger adult men are more apt to talk about it because that generation is more apt to vocalize their concerns and issues.
Different generation.
Different generation.
Absolutely.
Versus the older adult. Because we have in the group I run for spouses, it's all women that come. And I keep encouraging men to come, but you're correct. Men have a difficult time crossing over and saying, because they don't want to admit that they have some type of a weakness or a need that they have to deal with, and they don't want to deal with. But I also want to touch base on what you had said about taking care of the paperwork, because I think a lot of times spouses, when they're doing that, and that's a good education for them to be able to do their paperwork, I find a lot of times they start planning the paperwork for their spouse and they forget about doing it for themselves.
That's right.
So they make sure that they have power of attorney for the person with the Alzheimer's or dementia, but they don't do it for themselves. And I've asked several of them, said, well, do you have a power of attorney? Who's going to take care? Oh, well, No, I haven't done anything about that yet. So
That's a typical caregiver. They think
Yep.
they don't think about taking care of themselves. And that's very typical of caregivers because they're all worried about their patient and about their loved one and making sure that that person has everything available that they need. And then, oh, what about me, the caregiver? And that's why caregivers are so stressed out. They don't think about things that they need for themselves. They don't take time for themselves. And that's a great point that you brought up. So it's so important for people to share. And even when you share, you might not even know that that's something that you would need. And so by going to a support group, it's not just about laying out, on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, but it's about sharing information that's going to help you not only now, but in the future.
Yes, that's an important point because you never know with the person who has dementia what they're going to do next. Are they going to wander the day after tomorrow? Mm-hmm. Will they be driving that car and get lost next week? You never know when this is going to happen. And being prepared or having, some plan in place to deal with it is very, very important. And we stress in our support groups getting a plan in place, in fact, writing it out, posting it on or putting it on the side of the refrigerator, who to call in case of an emergency. Get it all in place as to what to do in case something happens to me, the caregiver.
That's right.
And somebody has to come in and take care of my loved one.
That's right. Good point. Good point. These are all wonderful things to learn. So we're going to take a commercial break and stay with us. We'll be right back with lots more tips for you from these two experts. Be right back.
Take a pen and jot down this information. Right from the Heart assists families in finding the right living arrangements for their aging parents. Founded in 2012 by Sharon Agate, Senior Lifestyle Consultant, Sharon has counseled seniors and their families for over 20 years in clinical settings and in independent assisted living and memory care communities. Finding the right community can be overwhelming and time-consuming. Right from the Heart takes the stress and worry from you. Sharon will meet with mom or dad and evaluate their needs and lifestyle preferences and create a personalized plan at no cost to you. She will accompany you to visit selected communities and guide you every step of the way so you can be assured you're making a well-informed decision. Call Sharon at 561-374-4696. Sharon's promise to you is in your knowing that her advice will always come right from the heart. Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. Arden Courts is not just a place to live. It's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, and welcome back. We're talking today to Dale Brune and Christina Levine, and they both give of their time and their talent as facilitators for multiple support groups around the area. And we've been talking about why support groups are good and who needs to go. So thank you so far for all the great information that you've been sharing so far on this show. I want to ask you a question. I'll start with Christina. Tell me about some memorable moments that you've experienced in your years of being a support group facilitator. Maybe you've had something very difficult that you were able to help someone overcome or prevent a crisis, or something that sticks out in your mind.
I guess probably the hardest thing that I find with caregivers when they first come to a support group is their comfort level, and how to make them comfortable in opening up and talking. So we always give them an opportunity, and the whole purpose of a support group as facilitators is to facilitate and not to talk. So we're there to educate but facilitate. So when they come and they're a little apprehensive, do I need to be here? I don't want to listen to everybody else's problems. That's a typical scenario. Or they're very, very angry about the disease itself. And I think just giving them that safe space, and several of the people that I've dealt with over the years, once they feel that they're safe and they can open up and talk about anything, and the people in the group will be there to support them and say, we've gone through this, and they help each other. I sit back and observe and watch the magic, really, of one caregiver to another, like Dale has done, like he went through himself when he started going. What he's doing now is helping each other, saying, I've been there, I've done that, you're not alone. So I think probably the most memorable one would be watching somebody who's so angry about the disease. It is a horrible disease, and it's a disease for the caregiver. And having that person be able to come to a point of acceptance. And I think once, and you don't always accept it, but to accept that this is my life now, and what do I do to go forward, and how to adjust and accept help. I think that's probably the hardest thing for most caregivers, is to accept help, and also to know who to ask for help from.
Right.
It's an educational process, but I think just getting over that hump and feeling comfortable, and then wanting to come back week to week, or however often you have the group, having them come back and feel like that stress is a little less each time, because they've been able to vocalize their anger or their frustration in a safe environment.
That's right. And if they can't get past the anger, then they're not going to be able to get the help that they need, because they're not receptive to it. And they're just so upset and angry, and they're not focusing, they're not listening. And even though they might be in the group, until they get past that anger into really accepting and then saying, what can I do about it? They're not helping themselves.
Well, I think we're there to let them know that it's okay to be angry, first and foremost. It's okay to be upset about it.
Yes.
It's okay to express it, and this is a safe place to do that. But you can't hold on to that for the rest of your life, because then for sure the caregiver is going to have more issues than the person that they're caring for.
It's a little bit like Vegas. They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So what happens?
True.
Right.
It's
so
a safe environment.
What happens in a support group, a caregiver support group, should stay in a caregiver support group, unless someone that you connect with and they reach out to you, and then you have, I'm sure, seen that people really make connections within the support group.
Absolutely.
And then they have their own little mini support groups outside of the official support group, which is even better, I think. So thank you for that. Dale, what about you? What's it like inside the men's support group, and how do you get them to open up, and then maybe share a story about something that you recall?
Well, we go around and share our stories. I tell the group when I start the meeting that we're going to go around. You're welcome to say anything you want to, bring up any issues you want to, or you may remain silent. I don't have the problem that they'll remain silent because mine are very, very talkative and share all their issues, and we get into some very, very good discussions, particularly about how do I take care of myself and what do I do in case something happens to me, and who is going to take care of my loved one. And that's where we go through this drill of lining up a plan, developing a plan for care. And you talk about anger. I can recall one incident in one of my support groups where this particular morning, this person walked into the group meeting and I could read on his face that he was totally stressed out. When it came to his turn to talk, he said to the group, I can't take it any longer. I'm going to pack up my wife and drive over to Detroit and take her to Dr. Krikorian. You could have heard a pin drop. We were aghast, and everybody, all the men said, look, and they mentioned his name, calm down. We'll help you through this. We will help you understand what you're dealing with, and we will get you through this crisis. And we did. But you can see how far a person, a caregiver, is pushed, and they reach the edge, and they're desperate to do anything.
That's right. That's right. And we try to get a hold of those caregivers before they get into a crisis situation, because when they're in a crisis, then, watch out, because that's the hardest time for not only the caregiver, but for the patient. They're dealing with a crisis.
The other thing that's difficult for any caregiver to understand is that if you're dealing with dementia, and more specifically Alzheimer's, you never know when that person loses a particular function. Mm-hmm. For example, loses the ability to find their way back home after walking, or find their way home when they go out with the car. In one of my support group meetings one morning, we were talking about how do you protect yourself or protect your loved one against some of these things. And one of the fellas said, oh, I don't have that problem yet. And about 15 minutes later, his phone rang, and he answered it. When he came back to the table, we could see that something was wrong when we looked at his face, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, well, that was my caretaker, or the aide that I have, and she just called and said that my wife had gone out for her walk and has not returned, and it's been an hour and a half since she's been gone.
Oh, my.
And so we calmed him down. We said, well, who can you call? And we walked through some procedures, and about 15 minutes later, he got another call from the same person and said a neighbor had found her. She had walked 1.5 miles away and was walking on Linton Boulevard, totally lost.
Wow.
So you see, you never know when that person is all of a sudden not going to end up being able to do that thing, return here or...
Right, because the statistics say 60% of people with Alzheimer's dementia will at some point wander away.
Right.
And, you're right. There are a lot of caregivers say, well, my wife wouldn't do that. My husband wouldn't do that. And I said, yes, you're right, until they do.
That's right.
And you don't know if they're going to be one of those 60%.
Absolutely.
And you have to be prepared. So you can't be in denial. I think that's one of the hardest things that caregivers, have to overcome, is being in denial about, the disease and how it can affect their loved one. They don't want it to, so therefore, they're going to will it not to happen, but that doesn't work that way.
One of the other very important facets of dealing with caregivers is to get them to realize that they have to take care of themselves. They are the important key in this whole equation. If they aren't healthy, if they aren't strong enough and able to withstand the stress, their life is going to be in jeopardy just as much as the care receiver. In fact, the statistics show that 65% of the caregivers die before the care receiver. And that's why we emphasize stay healthy, take care of your health, get respite, get help, have an aide come in, or family members come in so that you can get some rest and take care of yourself.
That's right, because if you don't take care of yourself, who's going to do it?
That's right.
You know, it's like the old saying, you know, the cobbler makes the shoes, but he walks around with holy shoes. And so, you know, and the painter that paints everybody's house, but he looks, you know, he lives in a house that's peeling with paint. So
Right.
we need to take care of the caregivers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, Chris, with your adult children, you probably stress the same thing to them because they're super stressed out. They have so much on their plate, juggling so many balls. Is there something that you recommend to them that's going to help them?
Well, it's interesting because last night I had my group, and just one person showed up last night, and which was good because she's been coming for several years. But it was her. She had the whole hour that we sat and talked, and
She had a one-on-one.
a one-on-one. And the interesting thing was that the whole time what we were talking about was, what are you doing for yourself recently? She's a full-time teacher. She teaches special ed children all day, then she goes home to her mother. Her mother's in a daycare situation, but she's got her mother all night and all weekend. And I said, when was the last time you went and got a massage, or you went, you know? And she says, oh, years and years and years. And so that's what we were working on. We were talking specifically about, you really need to put a plan together so that you get out more often and do something for yourself, something fun.
Right. And if you don't plan for it, it's not going to happen.
not gonna happen.
You know, one day will never be one day because you actually have to write it on the calendar. Make that appointment, put it on the calendar, because if it's not in writing, it usually doesn't happen. So a plan has to be something like you said, write it down, put it on the refrigerator, make it happen.
One of the simple little things that I tell my caregivers, your loved one is no longer capable of doing a lot of the things like handling your social calendar, planning special events. You have to plan your own birthday celebration. You have to plan your own anniversary celebration.
right.
You have to plan your own Thanksgiving, your own holidays, observances. You have to do that yourself because you can't count on your loved one to do that any longer. And you should do them because it's going to help you
Right.
really deal with all of these problems. It's going to help you just
Be
survive.
more organized and
That's right.
survive. That's great. Great advice from both of you. We're going to take our last commercial break and stay tuned. We'll be right back with more good information.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney, but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your first choice. Arden Courts is not just a place to live. It's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, Call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, and we're back. We've been talking about caregiver support group meetings and why they're important, what you can talk about in one, and who should come, who they're for. And we have with us Christina Levine and Teele Bruin, and they're wonderful support group facilitators. They've been sharing their knowledge, their experience, and their expertise with us. So we've been talking about lots of things with Teele, yes, Christina, and when people go to a support group, I guess, anything goes, really. I mean, anything that someone has on their heart or in their mind, they can ask those questions because, as you said, Christina, it is a safe environment. I just had to share one little story that there was a support group meeting and the doors were closed. There were several people in the room, and I happened to just be walking by the room. The door was closed, and there was hilarious laughter coming out of the support group. And I thought, that is so strange because, they're talking about their spouses that have Alzheimer's, dementia, and they're laughing their heads off. And I'm like, wow, I'm curious, what were they talking about? So when it was all over and the participants were leaving, I stopped one lady and I said, I heard all of you laughing in there. I said, well, what was so funny? What were you talking about? And she said, you really want to know? And I said, yeah, I do. And she said, sex. So, somebody brought up, about there's issues, and that's something else that it's very intimate. It's a hard subject to talk about because you have one spouse who maybe is more amorous than the other because they can't remember that they just were that way, and so sometimes it can cause a problem, and there's other issues that come up with that. So again, I mean, unless you have a special therapist that you go to that you pay for, I'm sure that a support group meeting, that's a safe subject you can bring up, talk about, and get some advice from some other people because, believe it or not, caregivers aren't the only ones going through this in their own mind. They think they are, right?
Right.
And so support groups are there to let them know you're not alone. Whatever you're experiencing, there has been somebody before you has gone through the same thing. So, Teele, you were talking about teaching men how to now be more independent to do things that maybe their wives used to do because of the support group that you have just for men, and having to do their social calendar and having to learn how to do the laundry, and they're keeping house. And I know one of the things that I thought was wonderful that some time back, you actually had a cooking class for men. Can you share about that a little bit?
Yes, we set up a class where the men could come in, and we had a dietitian and another person who was, I think, a case manager who was a good cook. And I joined the group, and we put together simple recipes. And we had the men gather around a demonstration table in a kitchen that we had, a laboratory kitchen, and we showed them how to prepare simple dishes from simple meals, because one of the hardest things that I find in working with the spouses who are males is that they all of a sudden have to, like you say, take over the household chores, laundry, making meals, making the beds, cleaning, things like that. They can hire people to do some of it, but you really need to have some of that skill. And getting them to
at least how to boil water,
right?
right?
That's right. Acquire that skill.
Turn the microwave on.
Is not an easy job. And so we try and make it easy for them. We give them simple recipes of food that's very, very tasty. We show them how, and then we let them make it, and then they have to eat it.
Ah, there you go. So hopefully they're all good cooks. They have to eat what they bake. I think that's awesome, teaching them new skills.
Yes.
Same thing, Christine, I'm sure, with the women that are in your support groups. Now they're
Handling
not
finances.
the finances. They're not the bill payer, and now all of a sudden all of this is thrown onto them.
Taking care of the car, that's a big one. Taking care of the car, knowing where to go when things need to be fixed in the house, things that their husbands used to manage and stuff like that. It's very disconcerting for them because they don't even know who to call, and a lot of times they'll refer to their adult children if they have adult children. But it's interesting because in my group today, that was the main topic, was the children and how to deal with them and how supportive they are, how sometimes they're more a hindrance than they are a support. So a lot of times they won't even go to their kids because they don't want
to impose sometimes.
Well, sometimes they don't want to impose. Sometimes they don't want to burden them. They don't want to, or they don't want their opinion.
Or they don't want to scare them, too, because...
Or the kids can't deal with it.
Right.
The kids can't deal with mom or dad having the disease.
That's one of the main problems. The children are in denial. They don't want to accept the fact that their father or mother has the disease. And the reason is that they don't visit very often. And we all know that the person who has Alzheimer's or other dementia, when they get into a setting where there are additional people other than the 24/7 caregiver, their functioning, their cognitive functioning rises.
Right, they're in a social situation.
When the son Johnny or the daughter Dorothy comes to visit,
They're better.
Their functioning rises, and they don't see the daily questions and the daily actions.
Those deficits aren't
result of
as
it.
a parent. And they're like,
That's
what are you
right.
talking about, Mom?
That's
Dad's
right.
fine.
She's fine.
And
Yep.
so they're in denial.
They're in denial. And so, for whatever reason, and then the spouse, they are frustrated because they can't explain that
to the children.
to the adult children.
Because they know they won't accept it.
And there's lots of reasons why they don't have that communication. So now, that's why support groups are even more important, because if you can't rely on your family, then you create your own family, your second family. A lot of support groups become second families for these caregivers. And those families are there for you because they understand, they've been through what you're going through. If they haven't been through it, they're going to be going through it. And so the family, those are your other family ties.
Oh, yes.
And it's wonderful to see caregivers bond that way. And sometimes I know caregivers from the support group that you do, Christina, they go out for lunch together. They make plans for
too.
dinner. And same with the guys, right? You go out and share some social time, because it's hard, not having your friends sometimes. Forget about the family, especially the ones that adult children that are further away, but you don't have your always your friends. Sometimes you find out who your true friends are.
Actually, your friends fall away, many of them, because
They
they
don't
don't
wanna deal
know
with it.
how to deal with the person who has Alzheimer's. And so your circle of friends just narrows down until you maybe only have one or two,
That's
and
right.
sometimes none.
That's right. So that's another reason why caregiver support groups are great. And before we end our show today, time is just about up. I want to ask Dale and Christina if they would share their contact numbers.
My
Quick.
phone number is 561-865-5511, and I'll be glad to talk to anybody about our support.
Great.
groups.
And you, Christina?
And ours number is 561-498-5552. Look forward to hearing from anybody. Thank you.
So take advantage, call them, reach out to them, join a support group, and please, please tell your friends, family, neighbors about the show. Join us next time, next Tuesday, same time, same place. And in the meantime, don't forget, give someone a hug. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its